Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight we're snuggling in for a cosy little tale about starvation, dysentery, and rocks the size of cows. That's right, we're talking about medieval sieges. You've probably seen the romantic versions. Brave defenders on battlements, noble knights charging catapults, dramatic speeches before dawn. This is not that story. This is about what it was actually like to be trapped in a walled city for weeks or months, while everything around you slowly died, including, eventually, your patience, your dignity, and probably your dog. So before we descend into this slow-motion disaster, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if the idea of falling asleep to tales of famine, fire, and 14th century plumbing failures brings you peace. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know we're all up too late together. Now, settle in. Breathe deep and try not to think about the fact that the grain silo is empty, the latrines are full, and there's a very loud army right outside your window. Because tonight, you're under siege, and it's going to get ugly. You live in a walled city, stone mostly, thick enough to keep the wolves out and the peasants in. No one calls it beautiful, not even the drunk stonemason who built half the towers. But it does the job. From a distance it looks imposing. From inside it smells like boiled cabbage, human waste, and damp wool, especially in the mornings. You've stopped noticing. This is your home. A compact, clattering knot of narrow lanes, market stalls, and people who know far too much about your business. If you shout in the street, 6 neighbours will hear. If you sneeze, 2 of them will offer onion wine, and 1 will accuse you of witchcraft. Community. You're not rich, but you're not destitute either, which in this century means you own a bowl, a wooden spoon, and enough fingers to count both. Your house is small, so small that if you roll over in your sleep, you either kiss the wall or your cousin. The ceiling leaks, the hearth smokes, the straw mattress has been reused so many times, it qualifies as an ancestor. But your roof hasn't collapsed, your teeth mostly haven't fallen out, and there's bread in the morning. That's more than some. Outside your door, the city hums. Bakers shout about their crusts, merchants haggle over sacks of flour, and someone is always playing a badly tuned lute, just out of reach of polite violence. The streets are paved with uneven stones, and mostly covered in whatever the horses left behind. You know which alleys flood when it rains, which gutters run quickest, and where the good fishmonger tosses scraps when no one's looking. You even know how to avoid the man who tries to convert everyone to radical theological positions before breakfast. You have a rhythm. It's not a good life, but it's familiar. And in the medieval world, that's suspiciously close to joy. The city is designed more or less for survival. There's a central well, a few scattered cisterns, and a main street wide enough for an ox cart if nobody's fighting. The gates are heavy, reinforced with iron bands and always guarded by men who look alert, but not too alert. The kind of alertness that says, I'll poke you with my spear if you're drunk, but not, I'll repel an invading army. The walls are solid, patched in places and dotted with defensive towers that mostly house birds. Still they give the impression of readiness, which is often all you need to sleep at night. Occasionally, someone important will stride through the streets in polished boots and remind you that this city is impenetrable, that it has stood for generations, that it withstood the bandits of Lord So-and-so, and the great flood of a year you weren't alive to remember. People nod, clap, and get back to stuffing turnips into baskets. The city has always been here. It always will be. It's hard to feel worried when your roof hasn't yet collapsed, and your neighbour is loudly arguing about the price of leeks. Then the rumours start, quiet at first, a whisper from a travelling merchant, a muttered warning from a priest who's a little too good at reading the skies. Someone claims to have seen smoke on the horizon. Another swears a friend in the next town over has already fled. You laugh, everyone laughs. Bandits, probably. or tax collectors. Either way, not your problem. You have cheese to salt and socks to patch. Let the nobility worry about far-off threats, but the mood changes subtly. The baker starts selling day-old loaves at full price. The guards at the gate are suddenly very interested in your business. A few people vanish quietly, the richer ones mostly, with cousins in the countryside. You still don't believe anything's wrong. Not really. Cities don't just get besieged, not cities with walls, not cities with you in them. And then one morning, the gates don't open. No fanfare, no announcement, just shut. You arrive late to market and find the usual trickle of travellers and peddlers replaced by silence. The guards look tense. The captain says it's just a precaution. No cause for concern. But you see the blacksmith nailing shut his shutters. You see the fishmonger loading salted eels into a cellar. You see the priest praying louder than usual. That's when it sinks in. Not in your bones, not yet, but in your gut, like a stone you accidentally swallowed with your gruel. You go home early that day. The lute player is gone. The streets are quieter. The gossip is more frantic and less funny. At dinner, your family eats in silence, chewing slowly, watching the door like it might knock itself open. You climb into bed and pull the blanket to your chin. It smells like mildew and smoke. You listen to the wind scratch against the shutters, and you try not to think about the gates. They're shut now, and no one said when they'll open again. They don't arrive all at once. That would be too clean, too cinematic. Instead, they trickle in. A scout here, a mounted rider there, figures you spot in the fields just beyond the walls. At first, you think it's travellers, or maybe a merchant caravan that took a wrong turn and ended up north of very much not welcome. But then you notice how they don't move like merchants. They're deliberate, watching, measuring. You hear someone say they've seen strange riders on the hills for 3 days straight. The guards joke about it. A few even bet on what kingdom they're from. But no one's laughing when one of them doesn't come back from patrol. Then come the banners. You spot them at dawn, unfurling on a ridge outside the city like a warning written in fabric. Bright colours, garish symbols, lions and crosses, eagles and skulls, designed to scream something between nobility and impending death. They're planted in the ground with theatrical confidence, and that's when you realise they aren't trying to sneak up on you. They want you to know they're coming, that they're here, that they've brought friends. By noon the fields are crawling, not with crops, those were trampled in the first hour, but with soldiers. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. They move in clumps, armoured like beetles and about as graceful. Horses snort, men bark orders, and tents sprout from the dirt like angry mushrooms. You can see the smoke from their campfires curling upward, even from the tower. It smells faintly of meat, sweat, and something burning that probably used to be someone's barn. They don't attack. Not right away. That would be merciful. No, instead they begin building. You watch them raise wooden towers, stack lumber, hammer spikes into the dirt. Siege equipment, someone mutters. Trebuchets, battering rams, and towers on wheels, absurdly tall things that shouldn't be able to move, but absolutely will. It's not fast and it's not subtle. It's slow, methodical, and very public. Every beam raised is a message. We are not in a hurry. We plan to stay. And you will regret every minute of it. The trebuchets go up first, colossal wooden monsters that creak and groan like they're already hungry. You've heard stories about what they can throw: boulders, burning pitch, diseased carcasses, even the heads of messengers who didn't say what the enemy wanted to hear. The men assembling them work like carpenters possessed, tying down counterweights the size of oxen, testing sling lengths with the kind of care usually reserved for baby cradles. You've never feared geometry before. Now it keeps you up at night. Next come the siege towers. Tall, ugly scaffolds on wheels, covered in wet hides to prevent fire damage. They look like barns that someone dared to stand upright. You know, deep down, that they're meant to be rolled right up to your walls, opened like terrible little advent calendars, and filled with armed men who want nothing more than to come inside and ruin everything. It takes days to build each one, but they don't seem worried. They've brought enough wood to deforest half the region, and probably enough rope to hang the other half. Then the shouting starts. Not just orders, that's been constant, but directed shouting. Taunts, songs, insults shouted up at the walls, crude gestures made at your towers. Some are funny, most are vile. One guy just screams your city's name, over and over, in a voice that suggests he's drunk, angry, and possibly missing several teeth. You begin to recognize him, and hate him. Eventually, you hate all of them. The drummers who pound out war rhythms at dawn, the cavalry that practices charge formations just within sight, and the poor wretch on a hill who blows a horn so loudly and so badly that even the pigeons flee. They don't want to kill you yet. They want you scared first, miserable, unnerved. They want you to wake in the middle of the night, hearing that cursed horn, and wonder how long until your gate is firewood. Psychological warfare, someone says. You don't know what that means, but it sounds about right. The city changes, people grow quieter, fewer arguments, fewer jokes. The laughter that does happen sounds thinner. You don't go to market for fun anymore. You go because your neighbour heard that someone saw a guy selling eggs. The guards now sleep in shifts. They've stopped pretending this will be over quickly. So have you. Every morning you climb the tower. Not because you want to, but because you have to know what's changed. One day, it's more tense. Another, a completed siege engine. Then you see it. They've dragged a rotting cow carcass onto a sling. You know what's coming. Everyone does. But it still doesn't feel real until you hear the thwack of the release, the creak of the throwing arm, and the wet, ugly splat somewhere in the city behind you. The enemy is at the gates, and they are patient. That's the worst part. The gates are shut. Properly this time. Barred, chained and sealed like someone inside knows something you don't. No more trade caravans, no more travellers, no more messages in or out. The city is no longer a city. It's a sealed jar, with you floating somewhere near the bottom, like a nervous pickle. You'd thought you were just avoiding a skirmish. Now you understand. You're inside a siege, and no one is going anywhere. You'd assumed someone might be allowed out. Important people, maybe. Couriers, diplomats. The man who insists he has goats outside the walls that need emotional support. But no, even he gets turned back, muttering bitterly about hooved dependence and conspiracy. The guards don't argue anymore. They don't explain. They just shake their heads and keep their hands on their spears. The message is clear. This is it. At first, it's not so bad. Life continues, at least on the surface. The baker still opens, though his loaves are smaller and somehow even drier. The market still operates, if only to sell the things no one really wants. Cracked turnips, salted fish that smells like old shoes, a suspicious quantity of beets. There's a new edge to every transaction. The normal jokes are quieter now. People glance over their shoulders more. And the moment you buy anything vaguely edible, at least one neighbour asks if you're willing to trade. You start noticing how quickly things disappear. The dried beans vanish in a day, then the onions, then the barley. Meat becomes a rumour, something your uncle once tasted, like dragon fruit or happiness. Everyone starts talking about reserves, though no one seems to know where these mythical food reserves are, or who's in charge of them. Some claim the castle has stores, the keep perched on the high ground at the centre of town, thick-walled and deeply unpopular. It's always been more symbol than sanctuary. Now it just looks smug. The castle gates remain open, for now, but guarded. Supplies are seen going in, but not out. A wagon of sacks rolls through the courtyard one morning, and the watching crowd goes silent, tracking each wheel turn like starving dogs. It's clear that whoever controls that keep is preparing for the long haul. Whether they plan to share is a question everyone pretends not to ask out loud. A week in, the novelty wears off. The streets are quieter. The lute player hasn't returned, possibly eaten. People walk faster, speak less, and eye each other like walking sacks of flour. You start conserving, first without thinking, then obsessively. Smaller meals, fewer trips to the well. You reuse firewood, scrape every bowl clean, and find yourself wondering what hay actually tastes like. The lockdown changes your routine. You stop leaving your house unless absolutely necessary. When you do, the city feels different. Not dead, but withdrawn, like it's holding its breath. There are no more children playing in the alleys, no more loud arguments over bread prices or saints. Even the dogs seem quieter, like they've caught on to something you haven't. You avoid eye contact with your neighbours. Not because you dislike them, but because if you see one more person chewing in public, you might snap. You begin noticing every sound, every creak, every cough, every groan of the wind against the shutters. You hear your own stomach more often than your own thoughts. You count the apples you have left, so many times you could recite their spots from memory. You dream of food, not fancy food, just enough food. A warm bowl of stew, a chunk of meat, even something goat-adjacent. The goats, after all, were last seen grazing peacefully outside the walls, unaware that they've become the town's most mourned delicacy. At night, the city feels especially small. You lie on your straw mattress, listening to the muffled sounds of dozens of other people doing the same. It's never silent. Someone is always shifting, sighing, or groaning in their sleep. You find yourself thinking in terms of days now, not plans, not the future. Just how many days until the flour runs out? How many days until the pickled cabbage starts to smell worse than it already does? How many days until the guards stop showing up for duty because they're too hungry to stand? By the second week, you're used to the closed gates. What you're not used to is the slow, creeping sense of being forgotten. It's not just that no one can leave, it's that no one's coming. No relief, no reinforcements, no surprise armies galloping over the horizon to break the siege in a glorious display of heroism. You're on your own. And while you used to feel protected by the walls, now they feel like something else entirely. Not guardians, but prison bars. The joke around town is that you're all just seasoning in a giant stew pot, waiting for the fire to heat up. The joke gets less funny each time someone says it. And yet, you've never wanted goat stew more in your life. Time in a siege changes shape. You stop thinking in days and start measuring life in bowls of gruel, candle stubs, and how many times your neighbour clears his throat before bed. The outside world becomes something vague and theoretical, a place with grass, wind, and people who don't measure food by weight in fingernails. Inside the walls, everything slows down, stretches thin. The gates are still sealed. The enemy hasn't attacked, not yet, but the waiting, the not knowing, is doing the damage for them. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes with siege time. Not real silence, never that, but a hollow stillness, like the city is holding its breath. You still hear sounds, but they're not the right ones. No markets, no music, no drunk singing hymns off-key at midnight. Just the wind, distant footsteps, and the occasional clang of a pot dropped in a room full of people who now hate that person a little more. Sometimes you think you hear movement from the enemy camp. A hammer striking wood, the clank of armour, a low chant in a language you don't understand. Then nothing. Just the sound of you being alive when you're not doing anything with it. Your body still wakes up each morning, though you're no longer sure why. With no work, no errands, and no sense of time beyond vague sunlight and your stomach's opinion on things, your days blur together. You create a routine, sweep the floor, check your stash, drink a thimble of thin soup, stare at the ceiling, sweep again. You've never been more productive at doing nothing in your life. You watch your family slowly adopt the same shuffle, the same 1,000-yard stare that settles in around day 12, give or take. It's not depression exactly. It's just siege. People try to keep busy. Some pray more than usual. Some carve wood if they're lucky enough to have any left. Others play quiet games with dice made from bones and knots in string. You watch the baker across the alley restack the same 3 loaves in his shop window every morning, even though no one's bought one in a week. You think it's his way of pretending everything's fine. Or maybe he's guarding them with the same grim vigilance one might reserve for a royal relic. The worst part isn't the boredom, it's the tension underneath it, the brittle nerves, the way people snap over nothing. You find yourself irrationally furious with the sound of your cousin chewing. Your neighbour hums the same 2-note song while washing, and you fantasize about dunking him in the barrel. Someone outside whistles once, a long high-pitched trill, and every head in the room turns like it's a threat. You're not scared of dying anymore. You're scared of cracking before you even get the chance. Rumours become the city's only form of energy. You hear them in the bread line, in whispered prayers, in the creaking of doors opened just wide enough to let nonsense leak out. The enemy is tunnelling under the wall. The well's been poisoned. The mayor tried to escape disguised as a chimney sweep and was eaten by dogs. The castle is hoarding salted pork. The castle has no food at all. The king is sending help. The king has never heard of your city. You nod, pretend to believe nothing, and quietly believe everything. Medieval timekeeping doesn't help. There are no clocks, just bells. And even those are starting to sound unsure of themselves. When you hear them now, it's hard to tell if they're marking the hour, or just someone ringing out of habit, desperate to fill the silence. You try to use the sun, but clouds make that unreliable. You use meals, but you're trying to skip those when you can. Eventually, you just stop trying. Time becomes what happens between noises. Superstition, like mould, flourishes in damp places with no fresh air. People begin to whisper about omens. Dead birds on windowsills, strange dreams, a child who hasn't spoken in 3 days and now only stares at walls. Someone paints a protective symbol in ash over their door. Others tie ribbons to the well, hoping to ward off whatever's in the water. A man down the road builds a shrine out of beetroot and chicken bones. You don't ask. No one asks anymore. Everyone is trying to buy luck, or at least bargain with it. The castle still stands in the centre of town, tall and stupidly smug, like it knows something you don't. The guards at its gates look less friendly these days, more serious. No one's seen the Lord in days, but his banners are still flying, and that's supposed to mean something. You wonder if he's inside praying for all of you, or if he's just counting how many smoked hams he has left. You lose track of how long it's been. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3. The walls still haven't fallen. No one's come through the gates, but it doesn't matter. The siege isn't out there anymore. It's in your house. It's in your head. You can feel it in your fingers, in the pacing of your feet, in the way your shoulders never quite relax. You've stopped waiting for the attack. Now you're just waiting for something to happen. Anything. Even if it's bad. Even if it's the end. You'd think the first casualties of a siege would fall to arrows. Or maybe fire. Something dramatic. Something involving screaming and at least one person shaking a fist at the heavens. But no. That's not how it starts. What gets people first is something much quieter, much wetter, and far more humiliating. It begins with a few sniffles, a couple of pale faces, and one man who excuses himself from a public conversation and never returns. Then it spreads, like a rumour, but smellier. It starts with the latrines. They were bad before, glorified pits with privacy curtains if you were lucky, and loose planks over a hole if you weren't. But now, they're overwhelmed. Too many people, using too few facilities with no one allowed to leave and no one volunteering to shovel what needs shoveling. The overflow begins slowly. A little dampness near the edges. Then a noticeable smell. Then an actual flow. That's when people stop walking too close to the alleys and children are told, in very stern tones, to hold it. Some don't. You start seeing people squatting behind carts, behind barrels, anywhere really. Modesty gives up before the bowels do. Then the water turns. You'd been relying on the central well because what else is there? But it starts tasting off. Maybe it's just your imagination. Maybe not. Someone says they saw a rat fall in and drown. Another swears they found something floating in their bucket that used to have fur. Boiling it helps a little, but fuel is short and desperation doesn't wait for a full rolling boil. So people drink, and then they get sick. It starts with stomach cramps, then the diarrhea, and once it begins, it doesn't stop. Not politely, not discreetly. You hear about entire households laid out on the floor, buckets nearby, too weak to move. You step over puddles in the street that you sincerely hope are just water. You pass neighbours whose complexions now match wet flour. Everyone is pale, tired, and slightly hunched, the posture of a population trying not to trust a single cough. And oh, the coughing. That comes next. You hear it echoing through walls at night, sharp and wet. Someone upstairs hacks for nearly an hour, and when they finally stop, you wonder if it's because they've fallen asleep, or because they're dead. People start referring to it as the cough, like it's a house guest. A very rude one. Herbalists suggest remedies, boiling nettles, chewing garlic, rubbing a poultice made of warm clay and horseradish on your chest. Some of it might help, most of it doesn't. One woman swears by a mixture of crushed frog and vinegar. No one asks questions. The city starts to smell different. Not just bad, it was always bad, but wrong. Sour, damp, sharp in the back of your throat. The scent of too many people, too close together, with too little soap. Every room smells like breath and old sweat. Every alley like rotten waste. You wash when you can, but it's not like water is unlimited. And even if you scrub until your skin peels, you're still sleeping next to someone who hasn't changed their tunic in 12 days. You start avoiding crowds. You stop shaking hands. You stop touching doorknobs. You hold your breath when someone speaks too closely. A cough in public might as well be a war crime. People who sneeze get entire benches to themselves. Children who sniffle are no longer adorable. They're potential plague ships. Everyone begins to eye each other like they're made of filth, which honestly, they kind of are. And then come the rats. Oh yes, the rats are doing just fine. While the rest of you wither, they thrive. You see them more often now, plump, bold, fearless. They skitter through kitchens, dart between feet, chew through sacks of grain like they know exactly how long it has to last. No one bothers to chase them anymore. Some people even talk about eating them. You laugh until you realise they're not joking. Then you stop laughing. Then you start wondering what rat actually tastes like. Then you stop wondering because you've seen what they eat, and the circle of disgust begins anew. The local healer is overwhelmed. She's out of herbs, out of ideas, and more than once, nearly out of the will to live. Her hands are stained from every bodily fluid imaginable, and her best advice is usually lie down and try not to move. People start making up cures, some helpful, most not. The most popular theory is that bad air is the cause. So you see people waving bundles of dried lavender, stuffing herbs in their sleeves, and burning bundles of straw in closed rooms. Several people pass out from the smoke, but they say it's better than catching the cough. Some people don't leave their homes anymore. They just stay inside and hope. Others wander the streets like ghosts, too sick to stay in bed, but too stubborn to die in private. Funerals become less ceremonial, more practical. A cart passes by every other day, collecting the latest dead. They're buried quickly, quietly, sometimes not very deeply. The grave digger is exhausted. You assume he sleeps surrounded by ghosts and back pain. Through it all, the castle remains locked up tight. You hear the nobles are fine. Of course they are. They have their own water, their own food, and presumably their own latrines that don't double as a city-wide public hazard. Rumour has it they even have soap. Soap. And so you huddle in your corner of the city, surrounded by filth, clinging to what little health you have left. Because while the enemy still hasn't broken through the walls, something else has. your stomach, your lungs, your trust in your neighbour's hygiene. In the end, it's not the sword that gets most people, it's the soup, and everything swimming in it. You used to think you were poor, not anymore. Now you look back at those days, eating bread every day, maybe even cheese once a week, as your golden age. Back then you had coins, you had a market with prices, you had a vague sense of what a chicken should cost. Now all of that is gone. Money hasn't stopped existing exactly, but it has become something you keep in a pouch to stare at when you want to remember how irrelevant your past is, because the economy, such as it was, has collapsed. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, prices just go up. A loaf of bread costs twice as much, then 3 times. Then you hear someone paid a boot buckle and a half-used candle for a single stale roll. Coins start to vanish, not because they're being spent, but because no one wants them. The baker doesn't need coins. The baker needs onions. The onion seller wants fuel. The man with firewood wants a clean rag and a promise you won't cough on him. Money is replaced with desperation, and desperation knows no standard rate. Barter takes over. Not fair barter. That's for people who still believe in rules. This is siege barter. Someone offers you a single turnip for a blanket. A neighbour trades a comb for a cup of lentils. You overhear a woman offering her husband's boots for half a smoked fish, and the seller has the nerve to say, it depends on the size. You've never seen grown men haggle so intensely over spoiled fruit. The market stalls have become theatres of quiet madness. The black market blossoms like mould in a damp cellar. There's always someone who knows someone who has something. A crust of bread, a wedge of cheese so hard it could kill a man if thrown. A bottle of vinegar, hoarded since the last harvest. The sellers don't speak loudly. They don't need to. Everyone already knows who they are. Their prices are absurd. A bit of dried meat will cost you your belt. Salt costs more than dignity. Anything remotely nourishing is worth its weight in family heirlooms, which is convenient because family heirlooms are now being traded for soup. And yes, the rats are back on the menu. You never thought you'd see a bidding war over a skinned rodent, but here you are, watching a trio of men argue over whose turn it is to buy dinner off a man holding what is, unmistakably, a tail. You'd gag, but that would burn calories. Someone tries to pass off a cat as a rabbit. Someone else doesn't care. Morality is the first thing to go in a siege, closely followed by meat. Meanwhile, the social fabric, already fraying, starts to rip. The rich barricade themselves behind thick doors. The ones who had stocked cellars early or had family inside the castle disappear from daily life. You hear they're doing fine. You hear they're throwing parties. You hear they've stopped sharing. The rest of you are stuck with what's left. Community soup pots, whispered trades, and the occasional riot over a cart of mouldy cabbages. People start guarding their homes with clubs. Not from soldiers, from each other. Food theft becomes a nightly risk. Families take turns staying awake to make sure no one breaks in to steal their last sack of barley or the jar of lard hidden beneath the hearth. Some people claim to have nothing just to avoid being targeted. Others pretend to have more, hoping it will grant them leverage. Everyone lies, everyone watches, everyone is hungry. There's a kind of humour to it, a dark, teeth-gritted humour. You laugh when someone trades a silver brooch for 2 potatoes. You chuckle when you hear that the mayor tried to pay for firewood with an official decree. No one accepts decrees anymore. The guards at the gates won't even take bribes, not because they're noble, but because no one has anything left to offer. Their loyalty now belongs to whoever feeds them, and that means the castle. Ah, yes, the castle. Its gates remain closed, but the rumours keep circulating. Some say they're eating off silver plates up there, stuffing themselves with salted meats and pickled fruits. Others insist they're running out too, that rationing has begun, and the Lord's wife was seen crying over an empty wine barrel. It could be true, or it could be fantasy, conjured by hungry minds desperate for justice. Either way, No one from the castle comes down anymore. They watch from the battlements like they're studying animals in a pit, which frankly, they are. You try to hold on to what you have, a few wrinkled apples, a crust of bread so dry it could be used as construction material. You slice it carefully, hoarding each bite. You stop chewing in public. You hide your meals. Eating has become a private act, not for shame, but for survival. If people knew you had food, they might knock. Or worse, they might not knock. And so the city eats itself one spoonful at a time. You used to talk about justice, charity, fairness. Now you talk about calories, about how many meals you can stretch from half a turnip and 3 questionable beans, about whether the candles are edible, about whether the belt around your waist would soften if boiled. Inflation, after all, isn't just a matter of economics. It's what happens to your belly when your belt no longer fits, because it's been in the soup pot for 3 days. Welcome to the siege economy. At first, hunger is a nuisance, an inconvenience, a gnawing emptiness that growls at you between meals and makes you irritable during conversations. You think you've been hungry before, on days when you missed breakfast or had to make dinner stretch a little longer than usual. That wasn't hunger. That was an appetizer. True starvation is slower, deeper, and quieter. It doesn't scream, it seeps. It hums in your bones and whispers behind your eyes, and then, one day, it moves in and makes itself comfortable. You've eaten everything that could reasonably be called food. Then you ate the things that couldn't. Bread made from bran and bark, soup made from weeds, boiled stones, and regret. You soaked leather straps in water until they were soft enough to chew, which is a generous word for what you did to them. You considered boiling your boots until you realised the sole had already been nibbled by something else. You ate anyway. Taste doesn't matter anymore. Texture is irrelevant. You just want to feel something in your stomach that isn't sharp and hollow. The pigeons disappeared weeks ago. At first they were a blessing, low-flying protein with no survival instincts. The children chased them. The old men built traps. Then they were gone, picked off one by one, plucked and stewed until even their bones were ground into broth. Rats, once despised, became commodities. You told yourself they were just small rabbits. Then you stopped telling yourself anything at all. Meat is meat, even if it squeaked. You remember the first time you smelled something truly delicious again. A rich, savoury aroma that drifted down the street like a cruel joke. You followed it, shamelessly, only to find your neighbour squatting over a fire with a pot. You asked what it was. He smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes and said it was found meat. You didn't ask more questions. You just stood there, inhaling. That may have been the best meal you've had this month, and you never even tasted it. People stop talking about food directly. It becomes something implied, mentioned sideways in glances and hints. I found something today. I might still have a little left. Don't come by tomorrow. You all know what that means. You just don't say it. Because the line between hunger and horror is thin and getting thinner. Your body changes. Your face hollows out, cheekbones growing sharper, eyes sinking back like you're retreating from the world. Your skin goes sallow. Your breath smells sour. You move slower, speak less. Standing up too quickly makes your vision blur. You chew slowly to trick yourself into thinking the meal lasted longer. You think about food constantly, not meals, but ingredients. What can be boiled? What might still be edible? You eye wooden furniture and wonder what kind of soup it might make. You try not to stare at your neighbour's dog. Then one day, the dog is gone. No one talks about it, and no one even mentions it. You just notice the leash has disappeared, and the owner won't make eye contact with anyone. A week later, another dog goes missing. The cat population drops off sharply. You realise at some point you haven't seen a bird in days. The city is falling silent. Not because people are dying, though that's happening too, but because all the noise that used to flutter, bark or squeak has been repurposed. The smell of cooking returns, occasionally, and you hate it. Not because it's unpleasant, quite the opposite. It's intoxicating, cruel. Every whiff is a reminder that someone somewhere still has something to cook, and you don't. You'd murder for a crust of bread. You'd trade your last sock for a spoonful of grease. That roast dog, if that's what it was, might genuinely be the best thing you've ever smelled. You consider knocking on the door? You don't. People grow quieter as they shrink. No one jokes anymore. The gossip has dried up. The arguments have vanished. Even the man who used to shout scripture from his roof has gone silent, possibly because the wind could knock him over now. Children don't cry. They just sit, wide-eyed and too tired to move. There's no energy left for drama, for flair, for anything but survival. You ration your strength like it's coin. Sit whenever possible. Sleep whenever hunger lets you. You don't dream of feasts anymore. Just warm rooms and still air. The strong grow desperate. The weak grow invisible. You see someone try to steal food and get beaten half to death. You don't intervene. You're not a hero. Heroes are too heavy to carry through famine. You walk past the body, not dead, but close, and think about how many people saw the same thing and had the same thought. No one shares anymore. There's nothing left to share. The castle still sits on its hill watching. Lights burn in its windows at night. Some say they've started eating their horses. Others say they've moved on to the servants. You don't know if it's true. You don't care. You don't have a horse. You don't have a servant. You have a bowl, a spoon, and a stomach that sounds like an angry ghost. You used to measure life in meals. Now you measure it in bites. Half an onion, a spoonful of broth, a chew of leather before it snaps. You're not full. You're never full, but the hunger has settled into you, quiet and constant. Like a roommate you didn't choose but now live with every day. You've stopped feeling full, or hopeful, or human. You're just waiting. For food, for death, for the next terrible thing. Whichever comes first, you thought they'd get bored. You hoped in some naive, half-starved corner of your brain that after weeks of sitting in mud, eating whatever passed for rations, and hurling empty threats at stone walls, they'd pack up and leave. Maybe they'd lose interest. Maybe disease would sweep through their camp like it has through your city. Maybe their king would call them home. Maybe the war would go cold. They do not get bored. They build. Every day, they build something new. You watch from the tower. Or rather, someone else does and tells you, because you don't have the energy to climb anymore. Wooden towers rise like crooked trees just beyond arrow range, covered in wet hides to stop you from burning them. Big rolling monstrosities with drawbridges on the front and murder in their bellies. They'll wheel them forward when the time comes, right up to your walls, open them like a coffin lid, and pour out soldiers who haven't eaten rat stew for 3 weeks. They dig too. You can't see that part, but you hear it. Late at night, just as you're about to drift into uneasy sleep, you hear the faintest rhythmic thud, thud, thud beneath your floorboards. At first, you think it's your heart. Then you realise it's them, tunnelling, undermining the walls, one swing at a time. Someone claims they can smell the earth shifting. Another swears they heard voices through the stone. You don't know what to believe, but you sleep closer to the centre of the city now, just in case the corner nearest the gate suddenly drops 6 feet and takes everyone in it down with it. The trebuchets are never idle. You once thought of them as simple catapults. Now you know better. These are siege gods made of timber and rope, hurling boulders the size of pigs with mechanical indifference. You hear the creak of their arms winding back. You hear the twang of release. And then, seconds later, the deep, meaty crack of stone against wall. Or roof, our house. One missed a target by several metres last week and reduced the baker's home to splinters. He wasn't in it, thankfully. He was watching from the next street over. He hasn't spoken since. Some of the projectiles are rocks, some aren't. One night, they launched a burning barrel of pitch. It hit a thatched roof and set 3 homes ablaze before anyone could smother it with wet blankets and desperation. Another time, They threw a bundle of something that burst on impact and released a smell so foul it cleared the entire square. Someone said it was a rotting animal. Others said it wasn't just one. Whatever it was, the smell has soaked into the stones, and even now, the air tastes wrong in that part of town. You've stopped asking what they'll do next. One night, it's silence. The next, it's drums, deep, repetitive, maddening. Some nights they chant, not words you recognise, just sounds, mocking, rhythmic, unsettling, a low hum that buzzes in your ears long after they stop. You wake up with it still in your head. You wake up thinking they're already inside. You check the door 5 times before lying back down. You never sleep through the night. Everyone's on edge. You flinch at creaking wood. You duck at sudden wind gusts. A child drops a clay bowl and 3 people scream. You've forgotten what a peaceful night sounds like. All you know now is anticipation, the constant, low-frequency terror that something is about to happen. That tonight will be the breach, or the fire, or the tunnel collapse. You wait for the next thing, always, and it always comes. Even the castle seems jumpier. Guards patrol more often, torches burn later. You hear shouting from inside the walls some nights, angry, muffled arguments. You wonder if they're just as scared, or if they know something you don't. You're used to not knowing. No one sleeps deeply anymore. Sleep is a shallow puddle you dip into, fully clothed, eyes half open, with one ear tuned to trebuchets and the other to whispers of betrayal. You lie on your back and count distant thuds. You try to convince yourself that the wall can hold, that the fire won't reach your roof, that you'll hear the tunnel collapse before it swallows your street. You lie, in other words, the way everyone does now. You'd give anything for quiet, true quiet, no shouting, no explosions, no groaning of wood under tension, or the whistle of stones overhead. You don't even remember what real silence sounds like. But you know one thing, the enemy doesn't rest, and because they don't, you can't. You're not just under siege anymore. You're being slowly, methodically unravelled. One strike, one torch, one sleepless night at a time. You remember when the city had leadership, back when orders were barked with confidence, and people nodded as if those orders meant something. There was a chain of command, a lord in the castle, a mayor in the square, a council of elderly men who mostly just agreed with each other. It wasn't perfect, but it looked like structure, like someone, somewhere, was in charge of things. That illusion has crumbled now, just like everything else. The Lord, hey, your noble protector, bearer of crests and titles and at least 3 chins, has not been seen in days. He's holed up in the castle keep, surrounded by guards, family, and what's left of the wine. Rumour has it he's drinking the good stuff by candlelight, while the rest of the city chews on boiled rags. Another rumour says he tried to make bread out of crushed almonds and priest tears. You don't know which version is true. You don't care. He's not coming down, that much is certain. The guards who once patrolled the city walls with a sense of purpose have taken on a new role. Opportunists. Some still stand watch, mostly for show. The rest have started charging for protection. They linger around market stalls with their palms out. They escort merchants between streets and confiscate supplies for inspection. One of them tried to tax someone for carrying a sharp stick. When questioned, he claimed it was technically a weapon. When pressed further, he offered to waive the fee in exchange for soup. Bribes are the new currency. You can't get a bucket of water without offering something in return. A blanket, a promise, your silence. Everything is negotiable now. A bribe might get you out of punishment, or into the castle, or maybe just a seat near the fire. You don't even bother pretending it's wrong. Everyone else is doing it, including the mayor, who has not handled this siege well. Ah, the mayor. A man elected, allegedly, for his wisdom, fairness, and robust moustache. He started strong. Daily speeches, well-fed optimism, declarations that help was coming, and the people must endure. That lasted maybe a week. Then the food ran out, the sick piled up, and the trebuchets started dropping surprises into the main square. Now the mayor is a wreck. He's taken to hiding in his home, drawing the curtains and sending out notes via messenger boys with trembling hands. His last great act of leadership was an escape plan involving a barrel, a rope, and what appeared to be a painted-on moustache. He was caught halfway to the sewer grate and has not been seen since. The city council still technically exists, though no one can agree on who's in it anymore. One councillor was last seen trying to trade his seat for a sack of oats. Another tried to declare martial law, then fainted from hunger halfway through the proclamation. The rest are probably at home, guarding their cupboards with broomsticks and pretending to pray. Governance has become theoretical. Authority is something people vaguely remember from stories. Without leadership, the city frays. Disputes go unsettled. Crimes go unpunished. Everyone is just doing whatever they can to survive. And survival doesn't leave room for civic duty. You see people looting abandoned homes, digging up gardens, and taking water from cisterns that probably haven't been clean since the last time it rained. You don't report it. There's no one to report it to. You just nod. Sometimes, you even join in. The worst part isn't the lawlessness, it's the indifference. No one is even pretending to care anymore. The guards don't enforce the rules. The council doesn't meet. The castle doesn't answer calls. You could scream from the tower and not get a response. No one expects anything from anyone. Expectations are a luxury the siege has burned away. You remember the speeches, the vows to defend every citizen, the promises that no one would starve, that the gates would hold, that unity would prevail. Empty words now, echoing in a city too tired to even be angry. What you feel isn't rage, it's resignation, a dull understanding that the people who are supposed to lead have already saved themselves, or tried to, and left the rest of you to rot. You still look at the castle sometimes, not with hope, just out of habit. It sits there, proud and pointless, a fat stone monument to abandonment. The Lord may still be alive inside it, but if he is, he's not leading. He's hiding. You imagine him pacing, muttering into his wine, wondering when it's safe to come out. You hope he's at least a little scared. Leadership hasn't been defeated, it hasn't been overthrown, it's just dissolved, washed away by hunger, fear and self-interest. The siege didn't crush your rulers, it just revealed what they were always going to do when things got bad. And now, with no one to guide you, no one to help, the city moves forward in the only way it knows how, quietly, grimly and completely alone. It starts as a whisper, like everything else in a siege. Someone says they saw a figure near the east gate after dark. Someone else heard the guards arguing. A third person claims to have found a note, folded, muddy, unsigned, with a drawing of the city walls and a crude X marked just beneath a guard tower. No one can prove anything, but that doesn't stop the rumours. They never needed proof, just hunger, fear, and a little imagination. Word spreads that someone might open a gate, or bribe a sentry, or dig a tunnel from inside to meet one of the enemy's own. No one knows who, or when, or how. That's the problem. The betrayal hasn't even happened yet. Or maybe it already has, but it doesn't matter. People start looking at each other differently. Not like neighbours, but like risks. Every stranger becomes a possible traitor. Every shadow looks longer than it should. You used to nod to people on your street. Now you avoid their eyes. You speak quietly, if at all. You sleep with your back to the wall and your hand under your straw mattress, where the knife you swore never to use now waits without judgment. You don't trust your door's latch anymore. You tie it shut with twine, then sleep lightly enough to hear it move. When someone walks past your home too slowly, you hold your breath. It's not just fear of the enemy now, it's fear of each other. Because hunger doesn't just erode the body, it eats away trust. You hear about someone whose storage jar was emptied in the night, about a widow who swears her last loaf was taken while she slept, about a man who claims his cousin told the enemy about a weak point in the wall, just for a promise of food. Whether any of it's true doesn't matter. The suspicion is real, and suspicion once planted grows fast in starving soil. You begin to notice who's eating too well, who looks healthier than they should, who's been mysteriously lucky with foraged goods. You don't accuse them, not out loud, but you don't go near them either. Not anymore. The ones who have too much are just as dangerous as the ones who have nothing, because both are desperate in different ways. Food theft becomes common. People guard their supplies like they're protecting gold, and in many ways, they are. A crust of bread is worth more than an oath. A jar of pickled roots can make you enemies. You hear shouting more often now, not the hollow bickering of early hunger, but sharp, brutal anger. Someone was caught breaking into a storeroom. Someone else was found with a bundle of goods that didn't belong to them. Punishments are swift and not always handed down by any kind of authority. Sometimes the neighbours just deal with it themselves. You try not to be nearby when they do. There's no due process in a siege, no trials, no appeals. If someone thinks you've stolen something, or might, you're guilty. That's it. One unlucky glance, one misplaced step, and you could end up tied to a post or dragged into the street. Everyone's nerves are frayed, everyone's hands are shaking, and everyone is looking for someone to blame. It doesn't help that real betrayals have happened before. You've heard the stories, in other cities, in other sieges, starving citizens opening the gates in the dead of night, hoping to be spared if they cooperate, or worse if they offer something, information, access, even hostages. The enemy doesn't always keep their promises, but by the time the betrayal is discovered, it's usually too late to regret it. You try not to think about it, but sometimes you wonder, what would it take? One meal, a bag of grain, protection for your family? Would you do it? You tell yourself no. You'd never. You say it again, with a little more conviction just to be sure. But the question doesn't leave. The guards aren't helping. Half of them can't be trusted either. You've already seen a few accept bribes. Some are hungry enough to take anything in exchange for a blind eye. Others have stopped showing up entirely. You don't know if they deserted, died, or simply gave up. Either way, the city has holes now, not just in its walls, but in its sense of safety. You used to think the siege was something outside, a force pressing inward. Now you understand it's inside too, in your homes, in your heads. The walls may still stand, but the real damage is happening behind them, quietly, patiently, one small betrayal at a time. You don't know if the gates have been opened, not yet, but you know the door between trust and survival has already been kicked off its hinges, and you're not sure anyone has the strength left to fix it. You were never supposed to be part of this. That's what soldiers were for. Guards, mercenaries, trained men with swords and armour and grim expressions. Not bakers, not cobblers, and certainly not you. Someone who once got winded chasing a chicken across a courtyard. But now, you're at the top of the wall, your hands shaking, your lungs burning, and your only weapon is a brick that used to be part of someone's chimney. The assault came at dawn, or maybe earlier. It's hard to tell when you haven't slept in 2 days and the sky looks the same, whether it's about to rain or about to collapse. They didn't announce it, of course. There was no trumpet, no call to arms, no dramatic speech, just a sudden thunder of hooves, the creak of siege towers rolling into place, and the all-too-familiar thunk of trebuchets launching their greetings. Then came the shouting. Then came the ladders. You're not even sure how you ended up here. One moment you were in your home, clutching a spoon like it could protect you. The next, someone was banging on doors, screaming that the enemy was scaling the walls, and suddenly everyone who could walk was being herded to the battlements. It didn't matter that you didn't have a weapon. No one did. The armory was empty. The guards who hadn't deserted were already outnumbered. And the only plan left was don't let them in. So here you are, chucking rocks, old tiles, bricks, anything you can lift. Someone next to you hurls a chair leg. Another man throws a chamber pot. Full. It hits someone. You can't see who, but you hear it. There is a brief stunned silence below, and then more screaming. You don't stop to think. You just throw, and duck, and throw again. They're everywhere, climbing ladders, charging the gate, trying to scale the walls like ants swarming a sugar loaf. You can hear them shouting, some in your language, some not. Commands, curses, screams of pain. The noise is deafening. It doesn't sound like war, it sounds like something breaking that was never meant to be broken. You see oil being poured from above, catching fire as it hits torches below. You smell burning flesh, hair, wood, panic. Someone near you is sobbing while firing arrows at random. Another is laughing hysterically while swinging a meat cleaver. You recognise him, the butcher from 2 streets over. His apron is still on, though it's soaked through now with sweat and blood. There are no more civilians. That distinction vanished the moment the ladders hit the wall. Now there are only people who fight and people who die. You're not sure which one you'll be by nightfall. You don't feel brave, you feel sick, but you keep going. Because stopping means letting them through. "We're out of arrows," someone yells. Another voice, deeper and angrier, shouts back, "Throw the furniture." And they do. A wooden stool flies off the wall, then a cracked bench, then what looks like an entire bed frame. You see a guard lift a broken table with 2 men's help and push it over the edge. It crushes 2 attackers on impact. Everyone cheers briefly before returning to their panic. The ladders keep coming. You push one off the wall yourself. It's heavier than you expect. You use your whole body, and when it finally topples backward, you nearly go with it. You hear the screams as it crashes. You don't look. You can't. You're too busy turning around to see the next one being raised just a few feet away. Someone throws hot sand. Someone else hurls an iron pot. It clangs off a helmet, and the man goes down. You realise the only rule left is gravity. If you can drop it, and it's heavy, and it makes a dent, then it's a weapon. You've never been more creative, or more terrified. The gate doesn't hold. You hear it splinter from the far end of the city. A booming, cracking sound that makes your spine twitch. They've broken through, or nearly. You're ordered, not by a soldier, but by someone with authority in their voice and blood on their face, to pull back. To the second wall, they say, like that's a comforting thought. You didn't know there was a second wall. Apparently, it's a waist-high barricade made of barrels, crates and furniture. You're starting to think furniture is the real hero of this siege. You retreat, not in defeat, not exactly, just to regroup, to hurl more objects, to take another breath before the next wave hits. You limp back behind the makeshift barrier, your arms bruised, your hands raw, your mouth dry. You catch your breath, reload your pile of broken roof tiles, and wait. Not because you think you'll win, but because there's nowhere else to go. The walls haven't fallen yet, but everything inside them is coming apart. And now you're a defender, whether you want to be or not. It doesn't matter how it happens, whether the gate finally splinters under the weight of the battering ram, whether a tunnel collapses and brings a chunk of the wall down with it, or whether some desperate soul on the inside unlocks a gate for a crust of bread and a false promise of mercy. The result is the same. One moment, the enemy is outside. The next, they're not. You hear it before you see it. A change in the shouting, a pitch higher, more frantic. Not the rhythmic cries of men throwing ladders or lobbing fire, but the panicked animal noise of people realising the line has been crossed. The defenders aren't shouting orders anymore. They're just shouting, retreating, dying. Then come the horns, not yours, the enemy's, triumphant, howling things that echo through the stone like laughter. That's when you know it's over. They flood in like water through a burst dam. No formation, no grace, just steel and speed and violence. The outer guards are the first to go, cut down or trampled in the rush. You see one man, someone you vaguely remember as a butcher, try to stand his ground with a cleaver. He's dead before he finishes raising it. The force that overtakes him doesn't pause. They keep moving, pushing deeper, toward you. Panic is a living thing now. It tears through the streets faster than any army. People run in every direction, tripping over each other, abandoning what little they still clung to. Families are separated in the crush. Doors slam shut behind strangers. Homes are bolted from the inside. Windows are shattered from the outside. There's screaming everywhere, not words, just sound. Pain, fear, and the terrible knowledge that nothing is safe anymore. You try to run, everyone does, but there's nowhere to run to. The alleys are choked with bodies, living and dead. The squares are war zones, the safe places, the ones you rehearsed in your mind, the ones you whispered about at night, have already been taken or are burning. You hear the fire before you see it, the roar of it, the crackling of dry timber catching fast. Someone knocked over a torch, or threw one, or decided to start looting with flame. Because that's what happens next, looting. Everything that can be stolen is taken, and everything that can't be taken is destroyed. Doors are kicked in, boxes smashed, cabinets emptied. You see a man stumble past with a sack of silver plates, his face wild and bloody, laughing as he trips over a corpse and keeps going. Another swings a torch inside a home just because he can. You recognize the house. It belonged to a midwife. It's gone now. There is no order, no targets, no mercy. The invaders aren't here to conquer. They're here to take. Food, gold, clothes, weapons, anything that isn't nailed down, and even some things that are. A child cries nearby and you don't look. You've learnt not to. You don't want to know. You don't want to see what comes next. Some resist. They fight with kitchen knives, with broom handles, with their fists. Some succeed in killing one or two before they are overwhelmed. You hear a scream, and then silence. You hear a cheer, and then a shriek. The soundscape of your city has become something monstrous. Every corner holds a new horror. Every street is worse than the last. You avoid them all, hiding behind rubble and praying that whatever God used to watch over this place has already left. The castle holds out a little longer. It always does. But even it isn't built to withstand betrayal and fire at the same time. You see smoke rising from the keep. Whether it's burning from the outside or within doesn't matter. Someone has breached the gates, or climbed the walls, or bribed the guards. You hear someone say the Lord is dead, stabbed trying to flee through the wine cellar. Someone else says he never even tried. Just drank until it ended. You don't wait to find out which version is true. You don't think about victory anymore. There is no victory, not for anyone. The attackers scream and pillage and burn, yes, but they're not celebrating. They're feasting, feeding, drunk on violence and smoke and power. This isn't justice, it isn't retribution. It's just the inevitable final act of a siege. The wolves have been at the gate for weeks, and now they're inside, and everything is meat. You don't know how long it lasts. An hour, a day. Time doesn't move normally anymore. You hide, you survive. You don't fight. You don't speak. You wait. That's all you can do. Eventually the noise fades. The fires burn lower. The shouting dies down, replaced by the occasional groan or the crash of something collapsing. The city is no longer a city. It's a graveyard that hasn't stopped moving yet. The siege is over. But what follows is something worse. A new kind of silence. There's no order to it, no dignity, no clean line between war and butchery. The enemy is inside, the gates are open, and the city that held out for so long is now being taken apart, one scream at a time. This isn't a battle anymore. It's a harvest. You've survived starvation, disease, betrayal, and terror, only to find yourself living in the punchline. The part where the survivors are finished off by someone who can barely stand upright but has a sword and something to prove. The soldiers don't look like heroes. They don't look like anything really. Some are missing helmets, others are shirtless and covered in soot. Many are drunk, whether from wine, adrenaline, or the sheer, giddy freedom of having no rules left to follow. Most are filthy. All are armed. They move like predators that haven't eaten in weeks, tearing through homes, ripping open chests, grabbing whatever shines and stabbing whatever doesn't. You try not to look at their faces. It doesn't help. Their eyes are wide. Their grins are too big. There's no coordination, no discipline, no restraint. You see one man swing a mace at a door just to hear it break. You see another haul a woman into the street and scream at no one in particular. When someone tries to stop him, he stabs them. Not with fury, but with the calm indifference of someone picking their teeth. Then he continues. You watch and you do nothing because doing something gets you killed faster. They don't spare the weak or the old or the sick. Mercy is a myth, like honor or clean water. A man on your street tries to surrender, hands raised, shaking, mouth open in plea, and gets a sword through the ribs before he can finish the sentence. Another clutches a holy book and begs in the enemy's language. They spit on him and take his shoes. You'd laugh if you hadn't seen them set fire to a house because someone inside asked a question. You see your neighbour, the one who used to sing while sweeping his doorstep, dragged from his home. He's hit once, twice, then pushed into the gutter where he doesn't get back up. A boy you don't know runs past holding something, a loaf of bread maybe, and is cut down mid-step by a man who looks like he hasn't slept in a week. You step back into a doorway, hands up, mouth shut, hoping invisibility is something you can fake. There's no safety in being unarmed, no safety in being cooperative. You've heard stories that some soldiers would let you live if you offered valuables, or if you begged convincingly, or if you promised to serve. But all of those stories come from people who aren't here. Here, the only thing that matters is whether the man with the weapon is in the mood to leave you breathing. Sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. Sometimes he says yes, sneezes, and kills your uncle anyway. Just bad timing. The women fare worse. You try not to watch, you try not to listen. But the city carries sound now, through broken walls and burned out halls and alleys with no more doors. There are no patrols, no justice, just packs of soldiers moving from house to house, taking what they want, ruining what they don't. You see one woman scream herself hoarse. You see another go silent before it even begins. You turn away and hate yourself for doing it, but you keep turning away. You don't know how many are dead. Probably hundreds, maybe thousands. You've stopped counting. The bodies in the street aren't unusual anymore. They're just part of the city, part of the new layout. You step over them like rubble, like broken carts, like sacks of grain that didn't make it to market. Some are buried in ash. Others are missing limbs. One still clutches a spoon. You don't ask why. You just keep walking. The looting continues long after the killing slows. The enemy digs through basements, pries up floorboards, dumps drawers into sacks. One man sets up a table in the square and begins selling stolen jewellery. Another stabs him, takes it all and sets up his own table. There's no end to it. Even the invaders are stealing from each other now. Victory has no shape. It's just a fire that keeps spreading. And somewhere in the distance the castle smoulders. The banners are gone. The windows are black. The place that was once a symbol of power, then a fortress of cowardice, is now just another pile of stone and smoke. You don't feel satisfied. You don't feel vindicated. You just feel tired. You're still alive somehow, still breathing, still moving, but you're not whole. No one is. This wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a liberation. It was a reset, a brutal reminder that sometimes survival has nothing to do with being spared and everything to do with being overlooked. You used to imagine that if the walls ever fell, there'd be a moment, a line that once crossed would mean the worst was over. But the truth is there is no line, just one long broken path with no clear end, and no mercy waiting at any point along the way. The siege is over, that's what they say. The shouting has stopped. The horns have gone silent, The fires are mostly out. You're alive somehow, still breathing, still walking, still able to tell yourself, in a dull, automatic voice, that the worst has passed. But what they don't say, what no one bothers to say, is that there's no such thing as going back to normal. There's only after. You step outside and find that your street doesn't exist anymore. Not really. The houses are hollowed out. Roofs sag or lie in piles. Doors hang from hinges. The well at the centre is black with ash and suspicion. Someone says it's poisoned. Someone else says it dried up. Either way, no one drinks from it now. The city smells like rot and smoke, and things that used to be people. You try not to breathe too deeply. There are more bodies than survivors. You can't bury them all, not quickly, not properly, not without tools and time and the strength no one has anymore. Some lie where they fell, half covered by dust or cloth or rubble. Others are stacked near the edge of the city, waiting for someone to dig graves that won't be dug. You see a man tossing lime into a pit with one arm, while the other dangles uselessly. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back. No one talks much, not even the ones who used to fill silences with complaints or prayers or bad jokes. Now it's all quiet gestures, grim faces, a shared understanding that words would only get in the way. You hear coughing, of course, always coughing. The sickness didn't end when the siege did. It just found new places to spread. Open wounds, contaminated water, exhausted bodies with nothing left to fight. Food is still scarce. The soldiers didn't leave much. What they didn't eat, they burned. The grain stores are gone, the markets are looted, the gardens trampled. The animals, those that weren't eaten, have fled or been taken. You find an onion in the dirt and almost weep. You eat it raw, crouched behind a collapsed wall, and pretend it's a meal. You see others doing the same, picking through debris for something edible, something useful, something that might be a beginning. The castle is a ruin, blackened stone, broken gates, no flags. You walk past it and feel nothing. No awe, no bitterness, just emptiness. Whatever lived in that place, power, authority, cruelty, comfort, is long gone. A few people have started picking through the rubble, looking for valuables or shelter or answers. They won't find any. Some walls are too thick to ever be useful again. You dream badly now, when you sleep at all. Visions of fire, of screaming, of doors that won't open. You jolt awake at the slightest sound. You sleep with a stick by your side, though you don't know what you'd do with it. Everyone's like that. Hollow-eyed, slow-moving, reacting too fast to shadows, and not fast enough to anything else. You've seen people jump at birds, flinch at falling leaves, burst into tears at the smell of smoke. No one calls it madness. It's just life now. No one knows what to do. The officials are gone, killed or hiding or pretending not to be officials anymore. The guard posts are empty. The church is cracked open like an egg. The healer still works, but mostly she just stares at people and tells them to rest. No one laughs at that. Rest isn't something you do after a siege. It's just the name you give the hours you sit still and try not to think. Rebuilding has begun, in a way. A few people have started clearing streets, rethatching roofs, collecting rainwater in cracked pots. Someone hammered a broken door back onto its frame and declared it a community hall. Someone else planted beans in a patch of mud next to a corpse they couldn't move. It's not much, but it's something. It has to be. You ask how long it will take to fix things, to rebuild, to feel human again. Someone says years, someone else says never. Both sound right. You've heard stories about cities that never recovered, places where the population never returned, where the name changed out of shame. You wonder if this will be one of those. If future travellers will pass through and say, "This was once a great city," while stepping over the bones. But you're still here, and so are others. That's something. You nod to each other in the mornings. You help lift beams. You share food when there is food. Not because you're hopeful. Hope is a luxury you stopped affording weeks ago. but because what else is there? The siege ended, and now survival has to begin again. Slower, meaner, but still forward. Victory, if that's what this is, doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like breath, like movement, like the dull ache in your arms as you sweep the dirt from a doorway and try to pretend it's still a home. Time passes. Somehow it always does. You clear the rubble, you dig the graves, you find the parts of your home that didn't burn, and you start there, a corner of wall still standing, a few roof beams that didn't rot. You sweep out the ash, you patch the cracks with mud and stubbornness, you eat what grows, drink what collects, and tell yourself, this is rebuilding. It has to be. The others do the same. Those who stayed, those who came out of hiding, those who returned from wherever they fled when the gates fell. You don't ask where they went. You don't ask what they saw. They don't ask you either. Everyone has their own memories now, their own horrors carved into the backs of their minds. You can see it in their eyes, the way they scan the horizon, even when there's no sound, the way they flinch at the creak of wood, the way no one sleeps too far from a weapon anymore. You fix what you can. The well is cleaned eventually. The walls are rebuilt, slowly. They're thicker now, higher in some places. Someone insists that this time they'll hold. You don't argue. You just help stack the stones. The granary is restocked bit by bit. Dried beans, hardtack, smoked meat when it's available. Not because you're optimistic, but because it's what you do after a siege. Pretend there will be a next time, and that you'll be ready for it. You tell your children stories, not all of them, not the worst ones, just enough to make them wary of walls and promises. You speak of the siege like it happened long ago, even though the smell of fire still lingers in the stones. You say, we survived, even if you don't feel like you did, even if what came out of that chaos is something new, something quieter, something watchful, the kind of survival that doesn't cheer, it just continues. The castle is rebuilt eventually, sort of. A new lord moves in, someone younger, louder, convinced that what happened was the fault of the last man and not the system itself. He holds a feast once to celebrate a new era of strength and vigilance. You don't attend, most people don't. The memory of banners flying over burning houses is still too fresh. Let him have his feast. You have fences to mend. For a time, things are peaceful. The crops grow, the markets return. There's music again sometimes, laughter cautiously. You catch yourself enjoying the sun, watching children play, chewing a piece of bread, and realizing it's the first time in months that you haven't measured your meal in bites. You breathe, and it feels less like survival and more like life. And then one day, someone hears something. A merchant maybe, or a passing rider. News from the east, a new war, a new army, someone claiming an old title, a border dispute that's mostly political for now. The details don't matter. What matters is the way people start watching the sky again, the way the guards at the gate tighten their patrols, the way the jokes about siege ladders come back. Not funny exactly, but familiar. The way the old people stop laughing altogether. You hear the rumours too. You hear the fear, growing like mould in quiet corners. You hear someone say, we're stronger now. You hear another say, they wouldn't dare. And then you hear someone, maybe even yourself, laugh. Because that's the thing, isn't it? You've heard it all before. The reassurances, the false certainty, the belief that this time will be different because now you're prepared. As if stronger walls ever mattered when the hunger came from inside. As if full granaries could keep out betrayal. As if a better plan could stop desperation from making monsters of ordinary people. You walk the rebuilt streets and nod to the familiar faces, the scarred ones who know the truth. You smile at the new ones, the ones who weren't here last time, who still think a city is its walls and not its wounds. You mend your tools, you tend your garden, you feed your family and pretend not to listen to the wind. but you hear it. Distant drums, or maybe thunder, or maybe nothing at all. It doesn't matter, because whether it's tomorrow or next year or in another lifetime, the siege always comes back. You'll patch the walls, you'll fill the granary, you'll wait. And when the next siege comes, you won't be shocked. You'll laugh. Because that's what survivors do when they've already lived through the end once. And that's the end of tonight's slow-motion disaster. The starving, burning, rat-infested nightmare of a medieval siege. Thanks for dragging yourself through this grim little loop of history with me. If you're still awake, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what part of the siege would have finished you off. The diarrhea, the fireballs, or the dog stew. Sleep well. You've earned